And it wasn't easy when he moved in with me a year after we met. It was 2 months before he was scheduled to begin a job as chaplain at St. Francis Hospital in San Francisco. He started that job and he got MRSA at work. And then he was diagnosed with diabetes on the same week that his diabetic brother lost both of his legs. We were broke. I mean, broke. My car got towed and all we were left with was $15 between us. We were living in the tiniest apartment in the Tenderloin, which is really saying something. And we slept on top of the closet. And if he could have talked, Toulouse would have 100 times a day said to Joe, "You're not my real dad, you can't tell me what to do." On Christmas Day, it was just a week before we left that tiny apartment and moved to the Central Valley, to Modesto. And I picked Joe up from work on his very last day at the hospital, and he took me to a beach at Half Moon Bay. And he gave me that look. You know, that look. And he pulled out this little box, and I said, "Oh, fudge." Or something like that. I wasn't ready, and I was pretty sure that I had told him that I didn't want to get married until it would be legal everywhere. I didn't want a second-class marriage. I didn't want an alternative marriage. I wanted a real legal wedding, and I thought he knew that. I thought I'd made it clear. So I can tell you that Christmas Day was very long and very quiet. But fast forward a couple years. Things were going well. We had moved to Cleveland. We both had decent paying jobs and congregations that really loved us, and we were doing good work. And everyone we knew the story of how I said no. That story became legend among our friends and family and even our congregants. And once again, we were at General Assembly, so it was the anniversary of our meeting. And Joe woke me on Friday morning with incredible news. The Supreme Court had just made same-sex marriage legal everywhere. It was incredible. It was something we never thought would happen. And I sprung out of bed to hug him, and I screamed in pain and fell to the floor. My foot was killing me. It was an old recurring injury. So he helped me get dressed, and we hobbled over to the convention center for this great big celebration in which all of the queer couples were brought up on stage to celebrate. And all day, nobody seemed to notice my shoeless foot or the crutches I had gotten from the first aid station, but they all asked me the same question. "Are you and Joe finally going to get married? You'd said you'd do it when it's legal." Well, it's legal. So I don't know which was more exhausting, the pain or the questions. So I went back to the hotel room, and Joe was really sweet. He brought me a turkey sandwich, and the pain got worse. But then we went to dinner with a bunch of queer friends to celebrate, and we shared scallops for an appetizer, and I had a steak and a beer. And any of you who know my medical story, you know what's about to happen. By the end of the dinner, I was in complete agony. I had to go to the hospital. And as I waited on a bench by the elevator for Joe to get a cab, a guy came out of the elevator and looked at my foot and said, "I'm a podiatrist. You have gout." Now, it shouldn't have been a surprise because my mother has gout, my brothers have gout. As would happen with them, the pain would come in these crushing waves. So while I was in the hospital, I would writhe and scream, and after tests and a whole bunch of shots of I don't even know what, the pain was subsiding. And through tears, this puffed up face, I said to Joe, "I'm ready. I want to marry you." And without missing a boat, he said, "Can I post that on Facebook? Engaged in the ER?" So in the following weeks and months, all of our queer friends rushed to get married, especially those who'd been together for decades. But we set our date for the shared anniversary of our meeting and our moving in together and the Supreme Court decision. We thought that after a year, the wedding wouldn't feel quite so political anymore. You know, the wedding was really hard to plan. We both wanted it to be zero waste, so that brought a level of complexity, but that was nothing compared to the other stuff. Joe, the love of my life, wanted a rainbow cake. I was having none of it. I'd lived in the rainbow-themed gay neighborhood of San Francisco for a few years, and I just wasn't going there. And that was a big discussion between the two of us. But worse, we had no idea whom to invite. Should we invite everyone from both of our congregations? Should we invite family and friends? Should we keep it really small and have just our closest friends? Or just chuck it all and have our friend Lucas marry us over dinner? We decided on everyone. Not that we had the budget for 350 guests. Mostly the problem was that we didn't grow up dreaming about our wedding like little girls are taught to do. Neither of us ever imagined that we would have the privilege of getting married, or that if we did, that people would even want to come. So we had no idea what we were doing, and when people would ask how the plans were going, we joked that what we really needed was a wife, a woman who actually thought about weddings while she was growing up, someone to give the event vision, a theme, but not a rainbow theme. And thankfully, a couple people from my congregation offered to help with food and to set up and decorations and stuff like that. So finally, we were on track. We would have an outdoor reception, a big church picnic under white tents with bluegrass music and contra dancing, and we would wear blue gingham ties and have blue gingham tablecloths, and instead of cutting cake at the end after dinner, we'd cut and serve watermelon before dinner. We said the dress would be smart casual, and no one had ever heard the term, so I used the term Google it a lot over the coming months. Then 6 days before the wedding, on Sunday, 48 people were killed at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. It was, and still is, the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. So immediately, guests were sending us emails canceling, saying that they wouldn't be coming. The two women from my congregation who were helping said they were too afraid to be at the wedding because they were afraid they'd be shot. The board at my congregation, where the wedding was to be held, had an emergency meeting on Tuesday, and they required us to hire, at our own expense, 2 uniformed, armed, off-duty police officers. It wasn't exactly how anybody pictures the biggest day of their life. So on Thursday, I was in the kitchen making dressings and sauces for the dinner when the song "Lovers in a Dangerous Time" came on, the Bare Naked Ladies version. I stopped what I was doing and I just listened. Nothing worth having comes without some kind of fight. You got to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. Joe came into the kitchen. We started crying when we heard those words. You got to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. We knew that we had to just show up and be joyful, no matter how painful or weird or even scary it was for queer people to gather in that moment. Even if everybody canceled, we had to go through with it. The amazing thing was that people actually showed up, more than we expected. One couple showed up with not only their 2 children that we knew, but they also showed up with their children from their previous marriages that we didn't know about, and their spouses and their children. There was one woman Everybody took pictures of her. It was really funny. They showed us afterward. Nobody had any idea who she was, but they all got her on film, in images, taking all of the host gifts off the table. She collected about 200 bars of full-size handmade bath soap. It was the weirdest day. A guy in the shortest shorts I have ever seen kept jumping line for watermelon, and every gay man present reported being flashed by the old Scottish guy in a kilt. During the service, we listened to Lovers in a Dangerous Time, and half of us were crying and half were smiling, but all of the Canadians, every single Canadian, and there were a lot of them, were popping up like whack-a-moles, and we just wanted to say to them, yes, we know it's a Canadian band, yes, we know it's a Canadian songwriter. Our officiants, Wayne Arneson, another Canadian, and Kathleen Rollens, his wife, added a sentence to our vows. Do you promise to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight? And we did. We also promised to prioritize our marriage over our vocation. And we promised to remember to laugh, no matter how hard things got. The incongruity of it all. I mean, we set a date that we thought would be apolitical, but a tragedy made it more political than any date we could have chosen. Some people didn't show up out of fear, but more people showed up just so that they could say that they were at a big gay wedding. It was both a protest and a parade. There was sadness and celebration. We celebrated our love and the support of our families and friends, congregants and colleagues, and we remembered all of the couples before us who were never allowed to marry. We remembered all those killed at Pulse. We brought our hopes and our dreams, our policy demands and our broken hearts to a place where we didn't have to shoulder our burdens or celebrate alone. Our wedding, 7 years ago today, was a summation of hundreds of years of invisibility and oppression coming together in a big zero-waste Blue Gingham-themed event with not a rainbow in sight. You know, in the last couple of years, I've heard more than one white guy talk about how Father's Day has been ruined by Juneteenth. This is the third Juneteenth where it's been a national holiday, and the third time it has fallen on Father's Day weekend. You'd think folks would be thrilled that some families are actually getting a 3-day weekend, but no. It seems, I don't know. It seems hard for folks, difficult to acknowledge a history in which some people suffered while other people prospered. It just seems impossible that we can carry those things at the same time while we celebrate fatherhood. Now, personally, I don't see what the problem is. I mean, we simultaneously celebrate and mourn all the time, like my wedding. Now, I'm not saying that we were perfect at it. God knows I had moments when I was on the pity pot and moments when I was angry about the incredible expectations created by the wedding industrial complex. Moments when I engaged in gallows humor with poor timing. But the truth is, we've all done it. We've all had sorrows and celebrations mingled. We've all had the gallows humor. We've all laughed at funeral receptions. We've all witnessed family dramas at weddings. You know, my parents went to a wedding the day after the groom's brothers were killed the night before in a car crash on their way home from the funeral. The parents of a friend of mine were married in Boston the day after Kennedy was assassinated. You know, nobody would ever want a situation like either of those, but both couples have wedding pictures in which they smiled and laughed. You know, humor gets us through times like that. Humor gets us through the suffering and allows us to see the lessons in everything, the connection in everything. Humor allows us to see that, yes, we are in fact better than our oppressors. Humor allows us to let go of the anger and other forbidden impulses. Most importantly, though, humor allows us to engage in a little incongruity, a chance to actually appreciate when things are inappropriate or inconsistent or lacking in harmony. Humor lets us indulge in the intellectual pleasure of noticing the ridiculousness of it all. Without the incongruity, I don't know how we could ever enjoy the best emotion, laughter through tears. Now, I'm not saying we should all laugh off Juneteenth as some kind of a joke, because obviously slavery wasn't a joke. The end of slavery in Texas after the Emancipation Proclamation was no joke. But you have to admit, it was pretty preposterous that it took 2.5 years for enslaved people in Galveston to learn that they had been legally freed, even in the days before telephones, television, and social media. But Juneteenth isn't just the celebration of the release of the last people held in slavery. It's a reminder that it took a long time to get there. A reminder that our history is not easy, that our founders got it wrong, and that we still get it wrong. Juneteenth is a reminder of how much there is left to do. So yes, Juneteenth is a protest and a party. Slavery wasn't a joke, Jim Crow wasn't a joke, the prison industrial complex, violence in black neighborhoods, and police violence against people of color are not jokes. And yet, gallows humor is what gets a lot of people through it all, and still gets them through it all. The oppression is different, but LGBTQ plus people know about gallows humor. The thing that's getting many of us through the physical and legal threats that we, especially trans folks right now, are facing is humor. And so here we are in the month of June, partying to celebrate our accomplishments and protesting against oppression, and protesting how much more oppression still exists. And we can do both at the same time. As for Father's Day on Juneteenth, well, it reminds me of an old joke. What's the difference between Mother's Day and Father's Day? You should all know this. On Father's Day, the gifts are cheaper. So while it may be true that Father's Day often takes a backseat to Mother's Day, the truth is fatherhood is every bit as complicated as motherhood and every bit as complicated as race and sexual identity and gender politics. At its worst, fatherhood can be fraught with abuse, neglect, and isolation. And at its best, it can be joyful. But even then, in that joy, there's loss, failure, regret. It's inevitable. We just have to remember to find the humor in the absurdity, the joy in the incongruities. We just have to remember that nothing worth having comes without some kind of fight and a kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. If we can do that together, we can accomplish a lot in this month. So let's all rise now in body or in spirit for number 1035 in the gray hymnal. Freedom is coming.